Welcome back to Fancastic. We had a great topic today. We are talking about the art of delegation in CAS, which is so important. But I have to start out this podcast by saying I want to declare my undying love for the Tartan Army. Like, I don't know if you guys are watching the World Cup, but it is beautiful and peaceful. And I publicly invite the entire Tartan Army to my house next year. I will serve haggis, neeps and toddies, or turnips and potatoes if you don't speak Scottish, single malt scotch. I mean, all of it. We'll sit around a bonfire and sing Bonnie Banks of Loch Lomond. Like, I am in for all that love. It just feels so good. Like, I'm on a high today after watching clips of the World Cup. I don't know if you guys are watching it, but it's pretty amazing.
Well, so I just got back from an Alaskan cruise with my husband, and there's 55 of us. It was all his friends and his father and his brother, and the entire cruise, all they did was watch the World Cup. And so I'm a bit World Cup out because the whole time
I'm not into sports. But I'm telling you, I watch it for the love.
It's fun.
The diversity of the people partying together. And I can't get enough of seeing the traffic cones on historic statues. Like, that's just brilliant. And I have a friend in England. She told me it's actually more of an English tradition that when guys would go home drunk from the bar, they'd steal traffic cones and stick them on lampposts. I mean, what a great tradition. I love it. Okay. Love you, Scotland. I'm coming soon. All right. So we're here to talk about the art of delegation in CAS. And Christine, obviously, you are our resident expert. Deneen is here to add a little color commentary, and she's kind of our eye candy as well. Thanks for that, Deneen. You look so refreshed after your cruise. But let's jump right in. Let's talk about the art of delegation because, it's so important. How many accountants have really ever taught to delegate? It's like, I'm the technician. I know it. I'm going to do it myself. So why does delegation matter in client advisory services, Christine?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot to it, but I think a lot of it matters because you can't scale, right? You can't scale, you can't grow without the delegation piece. But I think where just a lot of, where a lot of people struggle is, you generally get promoted to a manager level because you were such a good staff senior. You were such a good doer, right? You did all of the things right. And they're like, you know what? Now you're a manager. But then who's really taking the time to really sit down and then train people, not from a technical standpoint, but just from a more managerial, I don't even know if I call it soft skills, but all the things that you need to know on how to be a manager and how to elevate. I think we fail people that get promoted in that aspect from a training standpoint. It's just like you've done your job so well. Now, boom, you're a manager and you should know how to delegate and do all of the things that a manager does.
Right.
And so that's the hard part. Yeah.
And Deneen, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, not only managers, but I know CAS leaders that are doing the work. And I've had calls with CAS leaders canceled because they're doing payroll for one of their customers. And why are you doing payroll? Right? Why aren't you delegating that to somebody else? And so I agree with you, Christine. I think they're so good at doing the work. They get promoted into CAS manager or CAS leader. And sometimes it's easier just to do it than to delegate it.
Well, and there's so many aspects to that, right? Because that's also their comfort zone. I mean, we all do it. Yeah. And it's like, I know how to do this, especially when so many things feel so hard. You're like, you know what? I can take this easy task and I can complete it and I can feel like I accomplished something. There is something to that. So it's psychological as well.
Yeah. Getting it done off your checklist, but it shouldn't be the priority of your checklist. Yeah.
But there's a big difference between delegation and just offloading work. So true delegation it requires that training and lead up. And I think a lot of people think I'm just going to give it to this person, and offloading it is the same as delegation. And it's offloading with no instruction. I'm sure you probably see this as well.
Totally. It's not like you can just delegate a task and then just disappear and walk away. This is, you are as a manager now responsible for developing those future leaders as well. And maintaining your, the integrity of the work that you have with your client too. Like when you delegate something, your client should not feel any disruption in that relationship or their service or in the quality, right?
Yep. But let's be real, like delegation is so hard. And honestly, for me, there's an emotional connection there of delegating the work that I've always done. So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, why does it feel so hard?
Well, I think it's part of what we just talked about too. It's a little bit about, they're just CAS managers are used to being the doer. They're in the weeds. They know everything about the client. They're probably the primary client relationship manager. They know all of the things. And so it's really taking that knowledge and documenting and being able to convey that knowledge to a team member that you can pass on. So we talk about that a lot. All of this cannot just live in your head. And so do you have documented processes? And that's why it's hard for managers because they know everything, but it's generally just in their head, lives in their brain. And if you can't delegate and you don't have it documented, your team can't grow, you can't elevate yourself, your CAS can't scale. So the challenge is learning to let go of being the only person that knows how to do it, but also feeling safe in that delegation to where you have given enough instruction and you have enough guardrails around that you know that it's going to you just not that it's just going to be right because we'll talk about that too, but you do have to allow room for mistakes, but that nothing's really going to be detrimental or go out without your knowledge.
But I think, what you're alluding to is it's training your team to take over and upskill and take over a lot of the tasks that you shouldn't be doing anymore. And if you're not delegating to your team, then they're missing an opportunity to be learning from you and upscaling. But that takes time. Training takes time. And so, like we've consistently said, it's just easier to just do it. But you're missing a huge chance as that manager or CAS leader to help your team learn and grow and take over. So you got to let go a little bit too.
Right. It's the trusting, it's the letting go. Yeah, I agree with you, Deneen. And that's really where I think where a lot of CAS managers and just, I mean, I know we're CAS specific, but just where a lot of managers get stuck. So, so let's talk through some of that. When we start to think about, what CAS managers can delegate, we start when we consult with practices is, do you know, like, what do you have the authority to delegate? What do you have the authority to push down? But also knowing that the higher level advisory, strategic, complex stuff obviously isn't going to be something that you can delegate. But what you can delegate is usually more than you think. And a lot of that becomes, I think where managers get stuck too is they think about it as just tasks and not necessarily like, hey, do you want to sit in on this meeting, take notes? And my thing always with my staff was, I'm annoyed if I walk out of a meeting and I have more notes than you did from the client meeting. And obviously technology changes that on what you have, but it was like my biggest pet peeve. And I'm like, how do you retain this? And how can we, convert this into something that's documented when you didn't write it down? And so part of that though is taking those notes, but then saying, hey, here's this email from this client. Can you write the initial response? Here's the general context that we want that to look like, but giving your team a shot at starting that. But it also requires you to allow them into those conversations and into those meetings with the clients, right? Because they have to hear you over and over and over and over again on how does it sound? What does it look like? How does it feel? And again, it's funny that we have these conversations now because so much has changed with AI where you're like, okay, I'm just going to put this into my chat and it's going to spit out this perfect email, but it can't just be an AI email either. It has to feel personal.
Yeah. So I go back to delegation is not easy. It's got to be a slow process as you're really building that person up to take over fully. So are there things that managers have to be careful not to delegate too early?
I mean, I think part of that is really the high level advisory, the strategy, all of those things. But it's also, and this is an interesting but different topic, but it's also trying to help yourself grow to be strategic thinkers, because the more that you elevate yourself in that strategic thinking, maybe the more you can start to think about what you delegate, but also how are you bringing your team along the way and building them as future CAS leaders through all of this. So, I mean, it's kind of a mix.
Yeah.
I
So
think that's a really good distinction, though. It's not only about upskilling your team,
Yeah.
but it's also about moving yourself out of the day-to-day work more into a strategic role.
yeah, I mean, and this is all great advice, but we know firms want a distinct pathway. They want help. They want a guide through this. So I know that we talked about this. Infinite Ties has a new manager track, and you talk about creating something called a delegation decision matrix. Can you walk us through that and how that would help a firm with the delegation process?
Yeah, so it's kind of just like a fun matrix where, like, a lot of what we have in our manager track, this is in our first month's lesson, but it's using just keywords for delegate, and I'll take you through those, but these are like downloadable materials for you to take away. And so that's what we really love about this is, like, it's these like quick wins, and how can you take this and make it your own. But when we say this matrix, it's D is document, like, is there a clear SOP in place? E for energy, who has the bandwidth? L, level, what skill level is required to delegate? E, engagement, who wants this growth opportunity? G, guide, how much oversight will they need? A, accountability, who owns the outcome? T, time, is there enough runway to train first? And E, escalation, what is the backup plan? So it's, that's all delegate. And so again, take that, like, is there something that you can put in place? And this is for yourself, right? To just say, how am I thinking through who I would delegate this task to, and really think through all of those processes.
I think this is a simple framework. I think this is really good to give the managers a chance to pause and think and ask themselves these questions, and just not just do it, right? To have a simple framework to think through, should I be doing this? Or is this an opportunity for somebody else to learn and do?
Right. Because everybody's doing more than they should, right?
Always.
And so yeah, and we'll talk about some of those questions too. But now, so now, though, if we flip that delegation framework and then you flip it to okay, what's that framework look like for your team?
Yeah.
And what we have in this like delegation framework is this just like 4 basic levels of, every time you delegate something, you assign what those levels are so that your team knows. And like, as an example, like the first level is like, do it with me, right? And so you're going to do this, you're going to observe how I do it. And as you work up to the different levels, it just becomes more and more of their accountability, responsibility, what they need to report back to you, how you're going to review, what you're going to do. But that other delegation metrics that we also have within our manager team really clarifies to your team what their role is.
Anything to add, Deneen?
No, I mean, I think the framework is important. I think it's good to pause and think through all of these steps as you're growing as a manager and as you're growing your team.
I just want to be clear too, in case nobody caught that. So the questions: the document, energy level, engagement, guide, accountability, time, escalation. The first letter of each spells delegate.
Yep.
Just for the record. Very clever. Good mnemonic device. I love it. So, all right.
Nerds. We're nerds over here,
We're all nerds. We're all nerds. That's why we love each other, right? Woo. All right, let's talk about the 4 levels of delegation, because you do teach 4 distinct levels in your track. Can you just like break those down quickly for listeners?
Yeah. And so that was just kind of like, level 1 is watch me.
Mhm.
Level 2 is do it with me. Level 3 is you do, I review. And then level 4 is like, you own it and keep me informed. And so that becomes, once you assign maybe one of those levels to each task, especially if they're newer tasks,
Mm-hmm.
your team knows exactly what their level of responsibility and what they need to report back to you with. And that's that whole reporting back to is put that responsibility on them. Like, I'm done with this and I'm going to schedule time on your calendar for us to review it.
Yeah.
Review.
Can I just
Yeah,
break that
review is
down?
so sorry. Go
Can we
ahead,
just break
Kristy.
that down like a little bit further? Like, so those 4 levels, I think firms are going to want to have examples. So like level 1, watch me, join the client call with me, listen how I explain the cash forecast, right? Level 2, do
Yeah.
it with me. Let's prepare deferred revenue schedule together. You
Right.
do, I review. You're going to process that, team member. I'm going to review it. I'm not going to leave you alone. And then you own it, keep me informed. The team member owns it. That's full delegation. The manager is still periodically checking in. That person's never on an island. Those are the 4 levels. And I think those make so much sense and they're so easy to follow.
They're easy, but it's being very deliberate and
Mm-hmm.
specific too,
Yeah.
right? And when you think about like being specific, I think what we don't do really great at, or what I did never do really great at, is just setting those deadlines too.
Yeah.
But with a deadline that's enough time that still allows for learning and teaching, because what happens is that we all get so busy. Our team like sent it to us like a week ago. It's
Yeah.
due to the client
Yeah.
tomorrow. By
Yeah.
the time I pick it up, I don't have time to go back and ask questions. I don't have time to go back and teach. And
Mhm.
I just end up doing it myself.
Yep.
And so those deadlines are super important. But what we would do is just have the staff say, okay, schedule time on my calendar for it either to block out time for me to review by myself or for us to review it together. That's
Yeah.
in advance of whatever that client deadline is.
I think that's really important to review together because giving that your team time with you to review prior to the meeting is where the learning happens. Or
Exactly.
comfortability with asking questions because they're not going to do that in front of the customer. So then they are comfortable during the review to ask questions of you. That's when the learning happens.
And that it was always super important to me and Michelle. Like, we would bring our team in to review together because they start to learn that you have to pull them out of the weeds, and they start to learn how to review like a manager, how to pull themselves out of the weeds, what's important to, like, they would say like, this is how you review and what's important to me, and what I'm looking at from
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a does this make sense level rather than each transaction in detail. And so
Right.
I agree, Deneen. It was like the biggest training,
Mm-hmm.
um, lesson aspect that was so beneficial was reviewing and doing that together with them.
And making mistakes is part of the learning
Yeah.
process, right? So let's talk about that because
Yeah.
I'm very OCD. I don't like mistakes, right? No, none of us do. None of us want to hand over a mistake to a client. So you do have to leave room for mistakes. So I know some managers struggle with that. So can you give a little bit of direction, like how much room they should be leaving for mistakes?
Yeah, and when we talk about mistakes, we talk about, it's not like reckless mistakes, it's not like client damaging mistakes, but it's learning mistakes. And we
Yeah.
talk about this a lot where it's like, you know, we probably were promoted and we were given grace, right? Like how we all learned, we were all given grace. We were given grace to ask questions, we were given grace to like for them to take us through things. And so it really is we all have this sense of perfectionism of what we think just needs to be completely accurate all the time on the first pass, but that's not learning and that's not grace. And so it's, are you, ask yourself, are you really giving your team the time and grace to make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes again that aren't like detrimental but are learning mistakes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you feel though, Christine? Like, I feel like oftentimes your team members are afraid to show that vulnerability to their leader. And so how do you create that safe place to you learn from your mistakes. So how do you create that safe place for them to not overcompensate or prove their worth, or you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. I mean, and you do have to make them feel safe. It's not like They can't feel like their job's on the line. And I think that a lot of that becomes, though, identifying if it's a mistake or if it's a pattern, right? Those patterns become different from a trust issue. But for them to be able to trust that they can ask anything, we talk about this a lot, and we talked about it in our webinar today too, but it's creating that trust with your team is self-awareness. And are you self-aware of how you are acting, responding, the questions that you're asking, because when our team makes mistakes, and it's going to happen, and clients also have to know that it's going to happen. Like everything's not going to be perfect. Things are going to go wrong, but it's going to be, how are we going to deal with that when something does go wrong? So every time like something would happen, I'd have somebody run into my office, and my first question was, whose fault is it? And when I say that, I'm saying, is it our fault or is it the client's fault? Because my resolution mode is in two different directions, right? I'm like, how are we going to tackle, how we're going to resolve this? If it's our fault, that's a different aspect. And my whole thing was, listen, you're not in trouble. You're like, and I had to say that you're not in trouble. But what we need to understand is what went wrong. Where did, what was that missing cog in the wheel? What was that missing piece? And how do we fix it? But how do we make it so it doesn't happen again? And so the minute I said, you're not in trouble, we just need to figure out how we solve this in the best way possible and for future outcomes. They were like, oh, you can literally like see them like, oh, okay, I'm not in trouble. Like,
exhale. They weren't breathing until you said that, and they exhaled. I think this leads right into a quick discussion around documentation.
Yeah.
I know to scale, you have to document so you can pass it on to your team members. Otherwise, they're just coming back and asking you the same questions over and over again. So what's the tie between documentation and delegation for you, Christine and Deneen?
I think that goes back to like everything can't be in your head. And I think that that's where a lot of CAS managers live, is like, if your team has to come to you to find the answer every single time, that's not scalable.
Yeah.
And that's not documented. Right. And so really, truly like taking the time to brain dump everything about that client into some form or fashion. And it's funny, we consult with a lot of firms now, and so they'll say, yeah, we have that, or we have this. I'm like, oh, okay, great, can we see it?
Show us.
And it's like in their head.
Yeah.
This is the hardest piece. I think this is the hardest piece when we work with firms, is to really take the time to put it all down and somewhere it's easily attainable. But at the end of the day, it protects the manager's time.
Yes.
So you have to make time to protect your time and save time.
Yes.
Especially as often as we are either offshoring work or moving work between teams. I mean, you can't, as a manager, stop and train every single team and every single person each time. So we have these videos, and a video is recorded to each task. And it's like, it could be a 30-minute video. Go watch that first. That just saved me 30 minutes. Go watch that first and then come back with questions to me. And so firms are doing that more and more now, but it's just so important, especially as work moves and passes through CAS teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's talk about client communication. I think that's one of the hardest things for managers to delegate, or at least they hesitate, because they think, I've got the relationship, the clients want to hear from me, and you're always worried that your staff isn't quite there maybe, or might say the wrong thing. I know it's difficult for me to hand over client communications. What's the advice there?
I think part of that too, we've talked about it a little bit, but it's starting small. It's giving them the grace and space to start to join your client conversations, to hear what's happening, to give them the first pass at drafting emails and responses, and elevating every time. Okay, this is a bigger request from a client, or this is a different level of a question, and giving them just that grace and space to take a first stab at it.
Yeah,
but
I
also
think
the other
you're
side,
not throwing them right into the deep end right away. Like you're giving them little steps to take and little bit of practice, because ultimately then you're giving them the confidence. And that's a big part of this, is the confidence of being able to talk to the client, correspond with the client, understand the client.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know that being thrown in with the sharks and being expected to swim is always the best way to move forward with delegation. I mean, they certainly need your time, they need your attention, and you need to hand over that knowledge. And I'm sure there's also just a number of warning signs that you're not delegating properly, like the client still only contact you. You got, you're still working nights to finish staff level tasks. So what are some self-check-in things that managers can do to make sure that they are still delegating effectively throughout the process?
Yeah, and we dive into this a little bit more in the training, but it's like, what did I do this week that someone else could have done? What did I redo instead of coaching or training? What client knowledge is still only in my head? Who on my team needs a stretch opportunity? Who's asking for one? Who's bored? Are you watching your team enough to know, like, they're like, I'm ready for more, and feed me. And you're doing maybe some of the stuff that they want to do and you're overloaded. Yeah. Just like start to just be self-aware, but ask yourself at the end of every week, what did I do that I didn't necessarily need to do?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Christine, then can you just give listeners some common delegation mistakes? Because I'm sure once you start listing them, they're going to start checking those boxes, right? Realize that they might be doing those and hopefully learn from that.
Yeah. I mean, just a couple, because there's a lot, but delegating without context, without the specifics, without the deadlines, without the specific, expectation, outcomes, delegating too late. You wait until you're overwhelmed and then you rush kind of like what you're needing them to do. And then you lose a lot of training and coaching that way. And another one too, I think, is delegating only the low level work, the low value work. Like that's not helpful. Like, yes, it might be helping you, but are you really upskilling and training your team and truly delegating?
Right. Deneen, anything to add to that?
No, I think this is this is a good list. And I think the managers that are listening, they're going to recognize themselves in that list. Right. So I think just self-awareness is the first step, recognizing and then trying to, adjust and incorporate some of these ideas into the day-to-day.
Yeah. We mentioned earlier the new Infinite Ties CAS Manager track that you guys recently launched. Sounds like you did a webinar today. Can you just tell us a little bit more about why this belongs in the track, the delegation part of it?
Yeah, it's been fun because we talk to a lot of CAS leaders and we get their input on everything that we build. Like, what do you feel like your team's missing? What do you need? And when we got to the manager track, it was really like more of the, like we said, the managerial skills, not necessarily the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And so delegation, creates that capacity, allows you to scale your CAS model. And are we really thinking about it really truly from a CAS perspective? And I don't know that, we all think it's basic, but are we truly delegating with all of those parameters in place, with that framework in place, asking ourselves those questions, being self-aware? Because delegation is just one of those skills that sounds basic until you realize how much of the CAS model scalability depends on it.
Yeah. Deneen, thoughts?
I mean, I have lots of thoughts about.
I know you do. Lay them on us.
Not just delegation, but the CAS manager track in itself, because it's the number one thing our CAS leaders have been asking for is training. And there is no CAS specific training out there. And I would say there is no specific CAS manager track out there like this, because to Christine's point, this CAS manager 12-month training track that we've created to be so CAS specific is not necessarily about the technical skills. It's everything else that a CAS manager has to do. And delegation is a huge piece of that no one's been trained on. And so of course, I think everything that we do is fabulous, but I think it's so needed. And specifically created by CAS practitioners that have managed CAS managers and have wished their talent had been given this training. So I could keep going on my soapbox, but I think this training in itself and this delegation is just a piece of this really great training track.
I think soapboxes are okay if you know what you're talking about, and you do. A lot of really great information. So let's wrap with some final takeaways. Guys, this 30 minutes went by so fast. Deneen, what stands out to you from this discussion today?
How we're just getting started. How we're just really starting to scratch the surface of what these CAS teams need. We haven't even talked about AI, right? But AI is taking over a lot of the day-to-day job. And so bringing in more soft skills like this to the humans that are going to be the differentiator in accounting practices is just really the start. And I think it's exciting. For me, I think it's exciting. I think a lot of people get nervous because everything's changing so quickly and AI is forcing them into a place that at the end of the day, I always say they're going to love.
Yeah. Let's be clear. Delegation is not dumping. It's not abandonment. Right. It's developing your people with structure, support, and feedback over a given time. I mean, Christine, anything to add to that? Final takeaways from you?
I would just say it's leadership, right? It's how you create capacity. It's how you develop future leaders. It's how you upskill. It's how you just move from being that, person that did the work to the manager who's building the team that can deliver it and just grow. And so it's just, again, start small. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to feel big. And I know we all delegate, and it's not like the managers don't know how to do this, but I also think that there's always room for improvement, right? There's always more that we can be doing with it.
Absolutely. I think those are great takeaways. I think this is a perfect way to close. So thank you, Christine, for your wisdom as always. Deneen, thank you for your color and being the eye candy and also your brain today. And listeners, please keep coming back for more CAS Gold. That is our promise to you. And this is Fancastic. And remember, no Scotland, no party.